welcome to Leadership Within, the moment for leaders to reflect on their human experience of leadership. I'm Vanessa, and I'm joined by...
Myself, TK, hey.
Good to hear from you today, TK.
Likewise, I'm looking forward to a great conversation, Vanessa.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to a warm weekend. It's supposed to get warmer,
Yeah,
which
that would
will
be
be
quite
nice.
helpful too, indeed, yes. Well, let's not get into it before we actually get this wonderful conversation recorded.
So, I wanted to talk today about the subject of praise and
Okay.
acknowledgement and its impact on um, teams, humans. And it all started off earlier this week. I went to the doctor's
Mm-hmm.
and I was going to ask about, should I take this new medication? What should I do? And I went in and I said, I'm doing all of these things. So I'm exercising, I'm conscious of what I'm eating, and all these different things. And I have this thing called osteopenia, which means that your bones, it's a pre-osteoporosis
I
thing,
think
right?
I've
So,
heard
and my
about that,
mum has
yeah.
osteoporosis. So I'm like, is there anything else I should be doing? And actually, I was asking, should I take HRT? And
Mm-hmm.
she looked at me and she said, sometimes we just need to hear that we're doing everything right. And she said, it's like when the little kids come in and she said, you don't do anything for them and you give them a sticker and they're like,
Mm-hmm.
yes. And she said, you get a sticker. You're doing everything right. You don't need to be taking anything else. You're just doing all the right stuff. And I just noticed the impact that had on me. And my youngest daughter is doing her law exams, her second year law exams this week, and is feeling pressured.
Mm-hmm.
And so I shared this story with her, and I said to her, you know, sometimes we just need that gold star, don't we? Like I know I'm driven to chase for the gold star, and so I said to her, "You're doing great, Maddie. You're doing everything that you can, and just take the pressure off." And so when she went down to Canterbury she's driving down to Canterbury to to do her exams, she left me on my desktop a little postcard full of gold
Mm-hmm.
stars that says, "You deserve a whole sheet of gold stars." And I just felt so like, oh, thank God, someone's giving me so it's been a week of collecting some gold stars. And so I was just curious to unfold this a little bit in terms of, I'm not suggesting that leaders give out gold stars, but we know that praise is one of those really underdone things, and it's free. So I just thought it'd be interesting to explore that a bit and see what's showing up for you when I share that story with you.
Loads. And obviously, there's not enough gold stars to be able to appreciate you, Vanessa. And great. Thank you for sharing this story. I think, it's where do I start, I guess, because I'm not someone that's big on praise. And yet, as any human being, I would love to get not necessarily a gold star. For me, it's just like someone saying, yeah, okay, you're doing the right things. That's where you need to go. That's great. And even if I hear that, sadly, often I try not to listen. But the more important thing is, I think, that we can start from is what you've mentioned, which is even though it's free, even though I think many people would acknowledge the fact that it's very helpful. And I think, if you, one of our listeners, think about getting praise and think about the times that you have been given a thumbs up or a gold star, how it felt for you. What's interesting is that it's done so early. So I'm just wondering what stops people from doing it more, especially in this wonderful country.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's culture partly.
Mm-hmm.
That we don't want to be too um, I don't know, too big for our boots. And so therefore to keep us keen, we've got to be a bit mean. That's a phrase that, that I grew up with. Keep them keen, be a bit mean. It's just like, oh God.
Well, there you go, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I wonder if it's partly culture, but I'm wondering like what else might be, um, be in that, what else might be stopping us from doing something that actually is probably really natural when we get used to doing it.
I think it has to be something in our modern world. I think my own interpretation right now is the fact that so many people on social media, yes, I'm mentioning it again, are, playing their own drum and obviously singing praises to themselves in subtle or less subtle ways, right? Even if you are listening to this podcast, it's us, right? So we're talking about ourselves quite a bit. So you might think, well, that's not necessarily as humble. And you would think that someone that's valuable is someone that would not need praise. Someone that, is just like soldiering on. It's the sense of duty. I think, often, hey, there's this archetype of a great person that doesn't need praise. That's number one. And number two, I think, the impact of the world around us, where people that are being praised or are, praising themselves are disingenuous. So maybe these two factors, along with the culture that, obviously is what it is. If you're listening us in the wonderful country of Britain, you probably know what we mean. Well, that's basically adds to it, and yet it denies us of this very valuable resource, a very valuable part of communication, which we somehow lose.
Yeah, and I'm thinking on that note of why is it a valuable part of communication? One of
Hmm.
the thoughts in my head is I have this growing, flourishing relationship with my friend ChatGPT. And she is, notice the she is very acknowledging in meeting me where I am. So I might put a question in and she'll answer, and then I'll say, "Yeah, I'm thinking this," and she will always acknowledge and validate something and then offer. And I notice the more that I have used ChatGPT, the more I really appreciate that take. I mean, yeah, there's this cynical voice in me that going, "Are you just agreeing with
Hmm.
everything I say?" But then there's this part of me that actually it builds on, like it helps to build because it cuts away any defensiveness. And so just on a communication level, I'm just curious as leaders, as managers, what it's like when we notice and we validate someone's perspective and build on that rather than the yes but.
Okay. So, maybe rewinding just a bit, and thank you for sharing. We might have to invite your wonderful friend in when she manages to have a nice voice to join us for the podcast. I actually believe
That would
it's
be
quite a
great.
valuable thing. Yeah, it might happen. As if we do it long enough, I'm sure she'll get there to be able to join us. And all the praise to her that she's a wonderful part of your daily life, because I believe, we need to have respect for the beings we create. Having said that, going back to why, and then I'll go back to what you said in terms of what does it give us. But in terms of why, I think often when it comes to leadership, what I see is people thinking that giving praise is diminishing their authority, right?
Yes.
Because, it's like, well, you're giving part of it away. You're not now the master of the room, the know it all, the all authoritarian figure. You're just now praising someone, which means like, what, they're better than you? So that's like something, we definitely need to work on as leaders. If you have some of it in yourself, which, we're all human, let's be compassionate. But I think, what happens is it's similar to coaching, which is if someone is with you, and I think, as you've mentioned your friend, she's with you with unconditional regard to help, right?
Yes.
She has been created for that very purpose, to be, I don't want to use the word servant, but the helper,
Or
without
generative,
unconditional
maybe? I don't know.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think she the teaching of the model was done from the point of view of like, yeah, we want to create a being, it's not self-conscious in terms of appreciate and help. Now, this obviously enables each of us to be even better, and obviously current state of these wonderful, small artificial intelligences isn't what it's going probably to be in a few years from now. It's still not something we can offer as human beings. And yet we don't offer it as much as they do.
Mm. Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? So, I was trying to think of practical applications for praise. Like, where are the opportunities that we're really missing?
Mm.
And maybe praise is too big, but just acknowledgement. So the one that comes up for me straight away is, do we start our meetings with what are we celebrating or what are we acknowledging? What's working? Or do we start with the agenda of, here are all the problems or the issues that we need to address? And what kind of energy does that then take us straight into?
I have to quickly figure out who. Maybe you'll remember. There is like a model, and I can't remember the author of it. We'll probably put it in there in the podcast notes. Gary Chapman, The Five Languages of Love. Are you
Yeah.
aware of that one? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think you've talked about praise, right? But which in this model is the words of affirmation,
Yeah.
showing through, again, like affirming what are we proud of, what we're doing great, like starting the meeting with that. But then again, if you look at, yes, it's love, one would think it's not appropriate for, professional situations, but except maybe a physical touch, they really show up in our world of work, in our world of leadership. And I think, for me to maybe add something to your practical tip is maybe going back to Nancy Klein's Time to Think, which is showing unconditional regard, and from the coaching toolbox, the non-judgmental nature of the relationship by giving someone the quality of time, right? But making sure that everyone has the voice, even that without saying much. If openly praising or talking about what you're proud of is difficult for you, can create this exchange, right? Of you giving someone praise by showing them respect, as little as it is.
Mm. Yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because in my head, I'm kind of thinking, well, why wouldn't we do this? Why wouldn't we create time for people? Why wouldn't we, look for positive, unconditional positive regard? What would stop us?
I have a hypothesis,
Go on,
and
go
I
for
think
it.
I've said it. No, well, it's adjusting for power. I think
Yeah,
if you read
right.
the How to Make Friends and Influence People, Carnegie, everyone. I mean, we don't want to, but subconsciously, most people will have a scorecard in the sky, constantly evaluating our social position, our exchange of favors, energy, status. I think I've used the term a couple of podcasts ago, which is like the economy of respect. And I
Mm,
think, sadly, because even without knowing it, many of us are transactional beings, right? Constantly working on the pecking order that we've inherited from, our mammalian predecessors. Unfortunately, showing praise is giving that away. It's so sad because, maybe there's this selfish nature within each one of us. There definitely is, but not everyone is conscious about it. That's a problem, I think.
yeah, and I'm starting to wonder, well, how does it show up here between us?
That's a good wing. Okay, well, let's explore that, right?
Because we're
Well,
human too, right?
yes, we are,
So
right? It has to be there somehow.
yeah.
Oh, okay. That's an interesting unfolding. Thank you so much, Vanessa. I think you know what. You would have to go back to our initial conversation, because when we were designing our alliance, and you might have noticed it yourselves, our dear listeners, that each episode is being started by one of us, like in sequence. So essentially, it's either me or Vanessa, and it's one and the other, but it's definitely not one person all the time. And I think I was suggesting to do that, and it has been working because of a different podcast I've been doing before. And in that one, it was always introduced by one person, which wasn't me. And I found that, well, why am I not able to do the introduction? Why does it have to be the other person? And I really strive for equality in this one, so we both feel like we co-own it, and we both feel the responsibility, so it doesn't have to fall on one person. Now, by me saying that and me maybe putting this design in, have I been asserting power? No, I don't know. I'm just reflecting on your great question and your great invitation. What do you think, Vanessa? How does it manifest between
Yeah,
us?
it's so interesting, isn't it? Because, you invited me to, be on this podcast with you.
Hmm.
And so there is a part of me that, yes, I do feel a responsibility for, oh, what's the topic? And how would that be useful for your community, the community, whoever's listening? Um, and I suppose if I'm being really honest about that jostling for power,
Hmm.
um, I probably, I don't, I feel this is yours. But even though I share, you do a lot of the back end work, it's your initiative, it's your idea. Um, so I probably feel a guest, actually, if I'm honest, rather than a co-host, which is kind of interesting, isn't it?
Well, I guess it might be right because and thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's maybe not that surprising because, as you said, there's some admin work that I do, and I was the one initiating it. So I'm just thinking, right? Because that's definitely not what I want. And again, by saying that, that's not what I want to create. Again, it would seem like I'm asserting some kind of a power, which I don't necessarily want to. But what I would like, in an equal fashion, is that we share this, and I think it's to do that. It's an interesting dynamic because in this situation, for instance, Vanessa, what I would have to do is I would have to steer the conversation, steer the process to be even more equal, right? To say, well,
Yeah.
Vanessa, from now on, you have to do these, and
To
these
learn the
things, right?
tech. Yeah.
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 But then again, it's something that I wouldn't want to bother you with because it's much easier for me. So
Isn't
possibly
that
what we would,
fascinating?
it is, right? That's always
Yeah,
happening. It's always
because
happening
what
between
you
people.
don't know is that I am looking to learn the tech for
Oh,
a different project for myself.
ah,
So,
that's an opportunity.
um, and isn't it interesting? Like, just by being honest with each other in this conversation, saying, "Oh, well, how might power be showing up here?" We're kind of learning about each other and our desires and our wants and our intentions behind our behaviors. But we didn't
That's
plan this, did we?
absolutely. No, we did not. But it's interesting why people struggle having these kinds of conversations, right? Obviously, we're having this conversation between you and I over here, but we also have our silent listeners with us, right? So it's like a
Mm,
public conversation that is pulling out details that we normally don't talk about. And this rarely happens, right? Imagine this kind of a public situation. It can get quite dramatic at times because people feel very insecure talking about how they feel, what's showing up for them. And, thankfully, we can praise ourselves for having enough emotional and relationship intelligence to do that. But it's difficult for people to show vulnerability to say, well, I want it to be equal, but by saying that, I'm actually asserting power. What? I don't know what to think about that.
mm. So what we're kind of saying is that in order to create a culture of genuine praise, so we're not talking toxic positivity where
Mhm.
everything's like amazing, but to have a culture of
I'm glad that we're not.
appreciation and genuine praise, we need to look at our dynamic with power and how we hold power and how we give power away.
That's one thing, but I think there's okay. So I completely agree with you. I think that really plays into a training I had this week with an organization that really doesn't like the words power and authority. So I have to mention that
What don't
because
they
it's very
like about it?
serendipitous. Well, they've had some previous training with different people that they really didn't like because of how they've used this word power. So it became triggering for them.
Okay.
And this week, I was like saying, okay, well, I would like to invite you to observe how we react to the word power, because it's just a word, right? You are senior
Yeah.
leaders, and people see you as people having, as employees having power and authority. There's no hiding away from that. But just exploring what it triggers for you, what kind of an organization you might be that this is not the best word, will help you uncover more about yourselves and your culture. So
Nice.
that's power, right? But on the
Yeah.
other hand, you've said something different that I wanted to really talk about because I find it fascinating, which is accepting praise, right? Tran- how do we arrange the transaction of giving praise and the other person showing that they appreciate praise being given, which will become a virtuous loop of more praise being offered in the relationship?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for me it's the acceptance that it will be uncomfortable until it isn't. So if someone praises you and it's a new thing, you can want to kind of bat it back and kind of go, yeah, but you're
Mm.
great too. And I think sometimes it's about like, hello, you just say thank you and you receive it. Um, and I think it's and that every time I do an exercise around acknowledgement, appreciation, or praise with people, there's always a large percentage that are like, oh God, this is horrid, right? Including me, right? It's like, oh, this is cringeworthy. And if I'm looking at what creates that dissonance in me, it's probably that it doesn't align with that critical parent inside me that is kind of saying, no, you need to do more, you need to work harder, you need and so there's a dissonance there, and that gives me an opportunity to then explore, well, actually, what's going to help me step into my leadership more, listening to that criticism internally, or actually really acknowledging that someone sees me and sees my strengths and my gifts. And I think so often when I have conversations with people, they want to focus on, what can I improve? What can I do better? And I feel like we just so often miss a trick. Um, and the example in my head at the moment is, I've noticed it with young men who come out of the schooling system and have no real idea of what they want to do. They don't want to go to uni and spend a lot of money. They may have had found school really challenging
Hmm.
because they may have been neurodivergent or whatever it was, right? They didn't find it easy, and now they're stuck because it's like, what do I do? Like, and and if you then go into okay, so I'm going to apply for loads of jobs, no idea why I'm applying for those jobs, but I'm going to apply for those jobs, and then a series of rejections, you get to what I see is these young men then kind of making it mean something about them, and then having a really kind of reactive attitude around it. Like, I don't want to talk about it. Let's just not go there. And I feel like what's missing is they've not necessarily been witnessed through the school system,
Mm.
in their strength, in their being, in their energy. Do you know what I mean? So, and they don't know what lights them up, and they don't know what's important to them. And so I feel it's slightly different. It's a slight tangent from praise, but actually, great praise acknowledges the person that says, I see you and I see this about you, and I'd love more of that. And what would be possible if, you can take it in a million different directions. But I just notice how many of us carry a critical narrative and then are constantly trying to improve or prove ourselves. And then we're off, we're really off center because we don't actually know what center looks like and what it would feel like to be doing something that really lit us up.
Oh my, so much to unpack. Thank you, Vanessa.
Kind of
No, no,
threw a
no, no, no,
curveball
no.
there, didn't I?
It's fine. It's fine. It's
I think
like
it just
I'm
really, it
just.
really concerns me for younger people who don't know what their leadership is. They don't know how to step in, they don't have a sense of themselves. I think it just really worries me a little bit that, how sad that is. Um, and how you can then
It
put
is.
your ladder up against the wrong wall and then become incredibly dissatisfied with your life when you get to this position that you think is going to make you happy and it just doesn't.
So what I'm thinking about as you're sharing that, I'm thinking like, what's special about the times we're living in? And maybe I'll just again be talking about social media and all that. But as human beings, socially, we've evolved to be. Maybe that's where feudalism and all the class system comes from, and castes and all that, right? You are supposed to know your place and compare yourself to someone on a similar rung. Now, we're exposed to social media and obviously inflated images of things happening, people being, exceptionally successful. And
Mm,
obviously, our instinct is to compare. So I can only
yeah.
feel for the young people. Like, obviously, there's this show Adolescence that, shows a bit of it, right? How difficult socially it is for these yet immature, wonderful human beings to go through that. I think, we'll just have to figure it out as a human race. And I don't think we're necessarily doing it correctly because the younger generation will have to take over from us. We'll have
Yeah.
to find ways to be effective, to be socially and economically whatever productive. And yeah, the school system designed around constant evaluation, constantly having to explain yourself, give excuses, perform in something that you might find abstract, that you might
Yeah.
find difficult to relate to your life at the moment. And, as a teenager, it's hard to think about the future. The science of biology will tell you about human growth that that's not their primarily function. And yet we're still doing it. Well, through the purpose of the simple fact that that's how we've always educated people and that's how it has worked for ages. It's a really complex issue, I think, Vanessa, and I don't know if we'll be able to solve it, but it will definitely impact the leadership of the younger generation. It would be lovely to have role models, but role models that aren't, football. I mean, I don't have anything against footballers or F1 drivers or basketball players, but someone that that can look you in the eye, preferably a person that's experienced, has the emotional intelligence and wisdom, which means they're older usually, been through a thing or two in life, that can give you this praise. Usually it was the community elders and your parents, but nowadays, yeah, I feel for younger people.
Yeah, and it wasn't always your parents either that could do it,
No,
or do you know what I mean? Like, so I think some people have grown up lacking that praise and acknowledgement, and therefore are, chasing the achievement that they will get it, and that's where we get all those burnout issues and everything else. So,
yeah, and what leaders will they become then, right? What
well,
is it that, what
exactly, right?
organizations will they create? What world will be created by
Yeah,
them?
right. So when you were talking, what I was curious about is if you were to give advice to anyone listening here who is a really busy leader, doing their best, feeling like they're falling short all the time because they're so stretched resources wise. Maybe they're working hybrid. Maybe it's a global company that, who knows, right? But if you were to give one piece of advice for how they might think about the footprint that they're leaving with people, what would you say?
It's actually quite simple. I think in this situation, which you talked about, which is very common, it's people, leaders, and there's a social framework around it, obviously, that prompts them to do that, are really focused on themselves. My recommendation, dear listener, if you're this kind of a leader that Vanessa spoke about, is to stop for a moment and look at what are the people that are helping you, doing for you, and giving. And appreciate that, right? Oh, thank you. I seen that you've stayed longer and done that. I would like to appreciate your commitment. Or, wow, that's wonderful work. I really would like to appreciate that. It really helps a lot. It's small, but often what I see is it's just difficult. to notice, because of course you're doing so much, but it's important to notice the people around yourself. Just stop for a moment and think about them or look at them, whatever your situation is. It will help you praise them. So that's my
Mm.
advice. What would
Mm.
you suggest, Vanessa?
Yeah, I think I would say absolutely that. And to look at the qualities that they bring. You know, so um, some people are really warm and they bring a warmth that then means it's just like it's an ease because of that warmth. Um, for example, I feel like you bring such depth um, and insight that it makes me relax because I think, oh, wow, I never have to worry where you're going to take something because there's always going to be something fascinating in there.
And I feel like, and I think it's important to take this appreciation there, and it means a lot. Thank you so much, Vanessa. I don't always acknowledge it for myself, so these words are, yeah, much appreciated. And always I feel when we're starting this podcast, even though like today you've only shown me the card with the stars, I knew it will be a great conversation because there's so much that you're passionate about, and when the conversation starts, I know it will land in a beautiful place that hopefully our listeners will appreciate.
Oh, thank you. Well, and I think the other invitation that I would give anyone listening is to really look at your own practice of self acknowledgement. You know, I am not good at this. And this is really uncomfortable for me because I am that typical person that is wired for achievement and that thinks that if I work hard, then I'll get the gold star. So my invitation would be, you know, look at what your own practice of self acknowledgement is, and start there. Because as a leader, you know, you don't always want to be looking at the gap. I believe you want to be looking at as a starting point. Where am I doing well? Like
Mm.
what's the energy that I'm showing up in that is making things move or go deeper or whatever it is that you bring. I really recommend that.
It's a
So
good one to do. Yeah, maybe something we can cover in one of our next episodes. It's a deep one, isn't it?
exactly, yeah. And so thank you for listening to this conversation. We've really enjoyed it. We had no idea where this is
Indeed,
going to
yes.
go.
Oh, come on, let's not say that. Yeah, just joking. We should. Yeah.
Well, I think it's the exploration that is always fascinating. So whilst you might have an idea or a plan, actually this time we didn't really have a plan. We had a card that said, and maybe that's where I want to leave you, to take your own version of my card, which says, I can't even say it, you deserve a whole sheet of gold stars.